Welcome to PhRMA Foundation's webinar today. I'm Amy Miller, president of the PhRMA Foundation. The topic of today's webinar, as you can see, is funding opportunities for early career researchers. And here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the PhRMA Foundation. We're going to discuss the funding opportunities, go through the application process, the selection process, and then show you some of our resources. As a reminder, you can ask questions if you put them in the Q&A, and we'll see if we can get to all of them. So we are a small but mighty team of three. I'm Amy Miller, president of the PhRMA Foundation, and then Emily, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Ortman. I'm the head of communications for the foundation.
Thank you, Joanne.
And I'm Joanne Westfall, head of operations, which means you talk to me during the LOI, the application process, and if you're to be awarded, you'll talk to me during that stage as well.
And most importantly, she is the person behind info at pharmafoundation.org. So for those of you who don't know, the PhRMA Foundation is a nonprofit that awards grants and fellowships to biomedical innovators and early career researchers. Our funding comes from pharmaceutical companies, and every dollar we raise from them goes out to awardees every year. We value things that we try to prioritize. So we value integrity. And for applicants, that means pay attention to the details of our application process. We like high-risk projects, and be sure that your high-risk project is backed up by preliminary data or a strong scientific argument, and ideally both. We also like collaborations. And so what that means in this context is that make sure your collaborators are part of your letters of support in your full application process package. Our impact, we are a 60-year-old nonprofit, and over our 6 decades, we've given away over $110 million in research funding to over 2,700 awardees, representing over 270 research institutions, all in the United States. We award about 40 researchers annually in our core programs. So let's look at what we fund. Here are the categories we fund: drug discovery, delivery, translational medicine, and all of those LOIs are open for right now. The Value Assessment Health Outcomes portal will open later in September. We fund predoctoral students, postdoctoral students, and early career faculty. For predocs and postdocs, you can request 12, 18, or 24 months, and the number of months you request in no way influences decision-making. For early career faculty, we only offer 1 year of support.
Okay. As far as eligibility is concerned, please take a look at our website to confirm that you are eligible with all of the aspects. So you will see that in each funding category and in each discipline, there is a separate page. Please review that. These are the highlights. All applicants, regardless of citizenship, which means you can be a U.S. citizen or you don't have to be a U.S. citizen, but you have to be based in the United States at a U.S. institution to apply. We will confirm that. So please don't apply if you're in Poland and don't have a predoc, or I shouldn't say Poland, I mean any country outside of the U.S. Don't apply if you're not already here. Yes, that's what I meant. Predoctoral applicants should not apply if they're just entering grad school. You really have to have your first couple of years done and completed, because your grants office is going to be asked to confirm that if you should be awarded an award from us. So again, you have to be in your thesis research stage. Only 1 predoc per lab may apply. So you can apply to drug discovery while a colleague applies to drug delivery, but make sure your project aligns with that program's goals. If it does not align with that program's goals, you're not going to move forward. You won't get out of the LOI stage. As for postdocs, you are not eligible if your doctoral degree was before January of 2023. You're not eligible if you've received an NIH K-99 award, or an NIHF award. Keep in mind that our committees like to have intellectual diversity, meaning they tend to favor applicants who are doing a postdoc in a lab that is different than where they received their degree. Our faculty starter grants are for those just beginning independent status. It is for those starting their careers. Applicants should not have other substantial sources of research funding. Intramural funding or startup funding from your university is permitted. But if you have received, which means you're the PI of an R or a K award from the NIH or a career award from the National Science Foundation or other significant financial award monies, you are not eligible. Generally, funding over $150,000 a year is considered substantial to us, unless you're the PI of a grant where funds go to training others. If this is the case, explain that in your extended letter, and so that'll come at the application stage. Faculty starter grants are held to a very high bar. To be competitive at this stage, you must have a strong publication record and a great research idea. It cannot be iterative in nature. It truly needs to be novel and the type of project that could influence other research agendas, whether it's in academia or in industry. For all of our programs, predocs and postdocs, this is a funding mechanism for stipend support. You may not hold another fellowship while this is active. There are no monies that should go to the university in the form of fringe benefits or indirect costs. And the foundation will not consider multiple applications for similar efforts on the same project. So for example, if a predoc, a postdoc, and a faculty starter grant applicant from the same lab are submitting an application for proposed efforts on the same project, those efforts have to be separate activities and not duplicative. The committee will take a look at that. The committee will also take a look at those applications and only fund one person from that lab for that project. Amy, is there anything I'm missing?
I do want to recognize that some of you do have an NIH award that is currently not paying out. And so you still cannot apply for our awards, unfortunately. We can see that you've gotten an award. We can't see that a check's been cut or not cut. So I do apologize for those of you who fall into that bucket. We do have intermittently other funding opportunities. And so I do want to show you two. We have two challenge awards right now that are going to come on up. They're both open right now, and this is a trainee challenge award, meaning you have to be some sort of trainee. Details on both of these opportunities are on our website. We have two different calls for papers, and the first author will get $5,000 for an outstanding manuscript. So take a look at these two opportunities, and if you have a great idea in these two calls, please apply. You have plenty of time. Well, maybe not for April 15th, but for July 1st. All right, application process. So right now, our LOI portal is open for drug delivery, drug discovery, and translational medicine. Please note that the same day you have to file your taxes, you also have to file your LOI. You can see the other dates on this cycle timeline. For the letter of intent, you need an NIH style bio sketch. Be sure that it includes your bibliography. My name is Amy Miller. There are a lot of Amy Millers in ResearchGate, so help us find the right one by having a line that we can click into your bibliography. You also need an abstract. Your LOI is to be 600 words, and please fill out the research impact questions. A couple of helpful hints. For the LOI, make sure it is very well organized and very clear. For the research impact questions, answer all of them. Do not fail to answer one. If you fail to answer any of the research impact questions, that means your application is incomplete and it will not move on in the process. For the research impact questions, these are all of them for the 3 categories that are open right now. And I want to focus on the last question in discovery and delivery for a second. There's a lot of competition for our grants. And so when we ask you to explain how your project will advance drug delivery or drug development in a 3-year time horizon, we're very serious about that. We're looking for projects that industry can pick up when complete and use, or that a variety of other labs can use the research that came out of this study to get closer to in-human trials. And for translational medicine, it's very important that your project bring value to society within the near term. So give these some thoughts, because when we're triaging at the LOI process, or when your LOIs are being judged by our reviewers, these questions, especially the last ones, mean a lot to our reviewers. For the full application, again, the NIH biosketch and an extended letter. Some of you write beautiful extended, some of our past applicants have written beautiful extended letters explaining how they became interested in this particular topic in science, what they want to do with their career, and then what they want to do with this scientific thread. That's more or less an ideal extended letter. This is also your opportunities to explain some things. So for example, if you're an engineer who did a chemistry postdoc, explain what motivated you to do that and how it's going to make you a better scientist. We also seek out future leaders when we're picking between great proposals. Often it comes down to which of these 2 candidates is going to be a future leader. So any sort of leadership experience, it can be within science, it can be within your community. Put that in there. For the research plan, it has to contain these aspects. It has to have aims, rationale, significance, research design, methodology, preliminary results, if any, a timeline of milestones, and of course, a bibliography. When we say research plan, you also need a statistical plan. You have to explain what your power analysis. You have to explain your Bonferroni adjustments. You can't leave it to the reviewers to assume you're going to do those things. We can't assume. Also, for your research plan, a common mistake we see is when a researcher ignores a body of literature. So it's possible your scientific question was asked 25 years ago and answered. Be sure you're familiar with that literature. There also might be a literature that's adjacent to your scientific question. Be sure to know about it. We're not so happy when we see someone ignoring an entire body of research they really should know about. You also need a training plan. This, for the first year, you applicants will have to submit it, but you have to design it with your mentor. It should include, sorry, checking my notes right now. I didn't write it down. It should include what sort of coursework you're going to take. It should include the meetings you're having with your mentor or other collaborators. It should explain any gaps you have in your education necessary to complete the project. All of those aspects need to be in that training plan. And it is your responsibility to send it in to us now. Faculty only needs to give us a budget, and for faculty, if you have collaborators, ensure that they're mentioned in the budget. If they receive no funding, that's fine, but very often when collaborators are not in the budget, it causes some confusion at discussion. And then again, faculty only other sources of funding. So we've told you the excluded grant awards, anything over $150,000 from another foundation or nonprofit. We also, that's a little too much funding for us, but some of you are very creative, and we've seen successful applicants who've gotten a $50,000 award from one place, a $25,000 award from another place. And that's, to us, says this is a very creative person who's going to do what they have to do to fund their research. It's looked upon very nicely. So tell us all your other funding. And then for references, this is really important. Pick your references carefully. We definitely need your thesis advisor or your research supervisor. If you're doing some sort of collaborative program, so for example, if you have a statistician or if you have a geneticist, be sure that collaborator's got a letter in there. If you have a lot of collaborators, it is completely acceptable to have one letter from all collaborators, and then they all sign it. And we've also given you some other general references who are familiar with your career. It is okay to have a letter of reference from every stage of your career, but if you're a faculty starter grant, you really shouldn't just have your predoctoral mentors letter. You know, we need to see some more current letters as well. So the selection process. Our committees are interesting in that they're half academic and they're half from industry. So when you win a foundation award, that means not only have you risen to the top of a very competitive field of other applicants, you've also been reviewed by members of the pharmaceutical industry, which is novel, and they have seen promise in your career, your idea, and they're excited to see what you do with it. They can see some benefit to the industry itself. And they review the LOIs and the full applications. And so when all the LOIs come in, we do an eligibility check, just all those eligibility features that Joanne mentioned. We check that they're good. Then we send all the LOIs out to ideally one member of the academic side, one of the industry side, and they vote yes or no if you move on to the full full application stage. Then same thing when we receive your full application, we do another eligibility check. And then we send the applications ideally to a person from academia and industry and with a code word check or a keyword check. So we try to match up those keywords. This is very important. We don't always do great with the keyword checks because we may have too many from one category or not enough reviewers from another category. So you need to write clearly for an educated scientific audience that may not be expert in your exact field. So this is the review timeline. And you can start on January 1st or 2nd if you win one of our awards, and you will know by the holiday season, so you can celebrate. And what we like high risk, high reward, but it can't be throwing ideas at the wall to see what sticks. Our experts see right through that. We also think it's great if you've got a high risk, high reward idea, but you've got to give us a reason to think it will work. So it could be preliminary data. It could be published research. It needs to be scientifically grounded in some way. We also like research that doesn't typically have a home at other funders. So if you have a really great idea and it doesn't really fit in these two categories at the NIH, it's sort of in between them, you might have a lot of luck at the PhRMA Foundation. And we all like the studies that have implication beyond the project, but don't make us guess what it is. You have to tell us. You have to tell us in your letter of your extended letter, or you have to tell us in your full application. Emily?
Yep. So if you want to know what kind of projects that we've funded in the past, you can take a look at this in a couple different places. So we have interviews on our website and our YouTube page with our 2023 and 2024 awardees, in which they describe their research projects at kind of like a high layperson level. And then you can also go online and look at our past annual reports, which includes a description of each of the research projects that were funded that year. I will note that we do tweak and update our program goals every year, though, so it might change over time what you're seeing there. These interviews and the annual report are some of the additional benefits of winning a PhRMA Foundation award, besides the money, of course. We invest in your future as science communicators. So I provide a science communications training to all of our awardees on things like how to write a lay summary, giving an elevator pitch, how to do a media interview. And then I also interview the awardees for the videos that I mentioned, and create these videos to really help them promote themselves and their research. So the foundation, we also provide educational resources for all researchers, not just our awardees, to access that can help you with writing your application, as well as webinars that showcase industry career opportunities. So I'm going to walk through some of those. We've hosted webinars, as you can see, featuring current and former review committee members who share their insights on the LOI process and grant writing in general that are really helpful when you're working on your LOI and your application. And you can see here that along with these recorded webinars, we also provide blogs and infographics that kind of summarizes their advice. And you can find all of these resources. They're available on our website. And I highly recommend that you review them before you begin working on your LOI and your application. So here are some of the main takeaways from our review committee members in these different webinars that we've done. I'm just going to walk you through them really quickly. Number one, follow directions. If you don't include all the items that we ask for in the format that we ask for, then your LOI or application will be triaged before even being sent out to the review committee members. So follow directions. Number two, write your own proposal. So our committees pay close attention to what we call the voice of the applicant in the research package. And if they notice drastic changes in like writing style between the personal statement, for example, and the research plan, they might question whether the applicant actually wrote the research plan. And some of them even go as far as to go look at the PI's grants that they've written to see if language was pulled directly from there instead of being written by the applicant. So it's really important that you write your own proposal. And then next is ensure it fits the call. So obviously, we want you to go to our website and read very carefully the program goals under each award and make sure your project actually fits within the goals of the projects we're trying to fund. Next, reviewers, they're reading a ton of LOIs and applications, so making it easy for them to read, they greatly appreciate that. So making sure you're designing your LOI and your application package with using nice headers and spacing to make it as easy as possible for them to understand, they really appreciate that. Obviously, proofread. This seems like an obvious thing, but we have gotten things where people have sent us, the red line version of their document instead of the final version and things like that. So just be really, really careful and pay attention and try not to rush when you're submitting. Setting realistic goals, timeline, budget, that sort of things. Our reviewers really want to make sure that you are planning adequate time and that you're being realistic in what you can get done in the 1 or 2 years of your grant or your fellowship timeline. In addition, the reviewers always want to know, as Amy has mentioned several times now, the potential impact of your research. They want to know why it's going to matter, so make sure you lay it out for them very clearly. In addition to an outstanding research plan, you also have to show that you're a future leader. That is who we want to fund. We want to fund people who will be future leaders in their fields. And then, of course, getting excellent references. A generic reference letter is not going to do you any favors in the review process. Make sure they're outstanding if you can. I'm going to now share with you this short video that has some advice from our past awardees. These are 2023 awardees, tips on applying. And some of these are relevant to the LOI stage and some of them are more relevant to the application stage, but I think good advice generally. Hopefully everybody can hear this.
The best advice is just do it. Like, there's no harm in doing it. There's actually, even if you don't get funded, it's still a good experience to have. I mean, if you're going to stay in science, you need to be able to get funding and write grants and applications. And really, the PhRMA Foundation generally was a pretty smallish application. It was kind of a good intro to doing this.
The most important thing for me is to be organized. So there's like a lot of components that you have to submit. So I think it's best to have like a schedule. I've seen a lot of people applying for funding, and it's like they pull all-nighters working to finish this, and it's just not going to be your best work if you're super tired and exhausted trying to think of things to say.
I definitely tried to check out like what had been previously funded, just to get a sense of like scope and interest. Don't necessarily be afraid to like be like outside of the bounds a little bit, because it seems like the PhRMA Foundation is pretty open to like funding these more high risk projects, I would say.
Think thoughtfully as of the grant and the application as a whole. The pieces are, at least in my mind, you can't disentangle them. They might be different items on the to-do list, but they all need to be thought about holistically and collectively. So a personal statement should mirror themes that are discussed in the research statement, should mirror themes that are discussed in your impact questions. So it's a little bit of storytelling, which is kind of like an art of all of this. But of course, it needs to be underpinned by all of the great science as well.
So developing that specific aim page, like, going over it again and again is actually extremely important, so that you don't have to, keep redoing the proposal from scratch whenever, the PI had feels like, there are some aspects that you need to improve on. So yeah, working on a specific aims page, optimizing it very first, I think it makes the whole process more efficient.
Familiarize yourself with writing a competitive grant in the US in terms of style. Things changed a lot, and try to find or inform your references in terms of what are the necessary aspects to write good cover letters. Explore all the resources that the funding agencies provide for you to present a very competitive grant.
I would definitely recommend that having another set of eyes look at your application, and taking in all the help that you can, maybe from your grad school, from your mentor, your advisor.
So I'd recommend reaching out to past awardees, getting there. A lot of people are willing to share their applications, and they, the person that I reached out to, he was extremely helpful, offered to read through my application and provided support. And I think most people are willing to give even more support than you would expect.
I will encourage anyone that is applying to make sure you check all the boxes. I've done this, I did this, I did this, I did this. Check. Don't leave any stone unturned, and just do it. The work PhD students do is very important. Your research work is important, and it deserves to be funded. So do it, apply.
So just some highlights of advice from the awardees, which I think echoes a lot of the things that we've been saying. So the PhRMA Foundation also hosts public webinars that help researchers explore industry career opportunities and hone their professional skills. So you can see an example here. We've done webinars with Pfizer, with Eli Lilly, with Biogen and UCB about their PhRMD and PhD fellowship opportunities. And you can find those on our website and YouTube. And then we've also done webinars on things like the writing of grants, like I mentioned before, as well as on networking that could be really helpful. And now I'm going to pass it back to Amy for final thoughts before we start answering your questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I failed to mention that Emily put that video together. I liked the new illustrations. That was fun. And then every human you saw throughout this deck was a real award winner. So without our supporters, we could not provide grants to you guys. And so I want to thank every one of them here. And then for the next slide, I can see in the Q&A, a lot of you asked specific questions. So we're not going to be able to answer all of the specific questions. So if you've asked one about your particular circumstance, just cut it out of the Q&A and type it into info@pharmafoundation.org. That is a live email address. It is monitored 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And it's mostly Joanne, but when she's not at the desk, it is monitored by Emily. So we will answer your questions there. So any questions we don't answer, feel free to pop them in, especially if it's a specific circumstance question.
Amy, I'd like to jump in just 1 minute with that. I've been responding to some of those questions, and many of them are already on our website. If you look at the website based on the category you want to apply to and the funding level, you will answer most of your questions looking at the eligibility and the funding component tabs.
Thank you. So some of you sent in questions in advance. So I'm going to start with a few of those questions in advance. And I think Emily is going to be answering some of the questions that are in the Q&A right now. So what level of preliminary data is expected for a strong application? Preliminary data is always welcome, and the expected level depends on the category. So for a faculty starter, it'd be really great to have preliminary data, especially for high-risk projects. But for a pre-doc, it's very possible you won't have preliminary data, but the committees very much appreciate when it is in there. Somebody also asked about the LOI. If you have a data chart in there or a figure, it doesn't count against your 600 words. Just use that opportunity very wisely. And then our reviewers talk about how they do this on their laptops very often. So make sure whatever figures you put in there are clearly legible with a laptop at a Starbucks. That might be in an airport. Are there research areas that can increase competitiveness? In general, projects that can be replicated and used in other labs or projects that can change the course of a field in 3 to 5 years tend to be more competitive. And in this cycle, I suspect that projects that have an pharmaceutical industry orientation may be prioritized. What is the scoring criteria for a grant application? So our reviewers start with the scientific question. Is it a good, interesting question? Is it scientifically sound? And again, will it change the course of a field in the foreseeable future? So they start with that. Then they look at the applicant. Is the applicant a go-getter, a future leader? Are they going to be able to weather the storm if an aim doesn't work out? So they're looking for that in 2 places, in your extended letter and in your alternative plans section of your full application. And then they obviously are looking for a strong publication record for faculty and a fairly good one at the postdoctoral level. So at the postdoctoral level, you should have published your dissertation and maybe you should have written a review paper. So I know it changes a little bit depending on your area of study, but they are looking for people who have first author publications as a postdoc. Now, as a pre-doc, you might not have had the chance to publish, and we understand that, but they are looking for engagement in the broader scientific community. So you will have been in grad school for at least 2 years by the time you apply for our grants, and you should have engaged with the scientific community through poster sessions, for example, at a national meeting. The next one is how to include human data. It was also asked in the Q&A. So for translational medicine, we do require that you collect your clinical data, but there are times when you can't do that. So for example, if you are doing a study that requires a brain bank or a rare disease sample set that you have access to, you have to explain that in your application package. And for translational medicine, we do understand. Now, for translational medicine, when we're looking at very large data sets and doing analysis of very large data sets, that's not usually prioritized. You really do need to, you can do that work, but it needs to also be replicated in a clinical setting as well. So let's see. I think I've answered, I'll do one more. When should pre-docs apply? You must have completed 2 years of coursework and pass your qualifying exam or whatever your university's version of a qualifying exam is. And so for the LOI, we won't have any ability to check that other than that you've been in grad school for 2 years. But for the full application for eligibility there, we will look at your mentor's letter and we will seek that line where they certify that you've completed your coursework and you are working on your doctoral dissertation. All right, so I'm going to go over to the Q&A, and there are a lot of questions. So again, the hard requirement for 2 years into your program, if you have passed your qualifying exams, you can apply. And if you are able to pass them quickly, great. So for questions about specific eligibility, please email them. And there are a lot of those. So in the past, awards on vaccine platforms and delivery methods, our interests are not limited to those awards you've seen. To be clear, the PhRMA Foundation is very interested in vaccine and antigen delivery methods for vaccines. So those are all formulations, they're all relevant. So just because you see who's won, please know that we're very interested in vaccine research and encourage you to apply. So again, for questions that require me to think more than a minute, I'm going to have to ask you to send it to info. We don't have an IP policy for any new invention that comes out of the grant. If you invent it, I believe it belongs to you and your university. Good luck with that, by the way. One of our awardees made a drug. Well, more than one of our awardees have made a drug. So we hope you do. What percentage of submitted LOIs? I can't answer that question, but our pay line hovers around 10%, all told. So all categories. But when our committee meets, we don't tell them you have to fund this many pre-docs, this many postdocs, this many faculty starters. We give them a budget and they can divide their budget the way they see fit. So you're competing against all of them. And so for faculty starters, I will say you're going to have to wow the committee. You're going to have to be extraordinary because the faculty starters are last. And so the committee has been very excited about the new researchers coming out of doctoral programs, and it's a really cool postdoctoral theses and ideas. And so you really do have to wow them at that faculty starter grant. And then they decide how to divide the budget that we give them. Eligibility questions, go to info. So we do like intellectual diversity. And so we had a question about what if you do your grad work and your postdoc in the same lab, but you change direction? You can certainly apply, but I will say they do tend to prefer that you do your postdoctoral work at a different lab. Now, we have funded people, though, who have done their postdocs at their same university. So Joanne, do they need to engage their university's research office at the LOI stage?
They do not have to engage their university office at this stage. However, if, for example, I'm getting a lot of questions from postdocs saying I have an appointment for a faculty position starting in fall of 2025, that will be confirmed. You will need a letter of support from that university saying, yes, you had this confirmed appointment and it will begin on such and such date. Same thing goes from a pre-doc to a postdoc level. If you have a postdoc appointment already confirmed, you may apply. In either of these cases at your LOI stage, all we want to know is send an email to info@phrmafoundation.org with your situation. And at the bottom of your LOI, please state that you have a confirmed appointment for whatever level starting on such and such date, and that the university will confirm it if you're selected to go on to the application stage.
That's very important to note that you have to have the appointment to compete at the full application stage. And so that's a very important point. We don't have available templates for submitted documents, but the NIH has lots of templates. I suspect people will go on there because our applications do look a lot alike. So that's a great question. Someone noticed in 23 and 24, we didn't award pre-docs. That's because we didn't award pre-docs in 23 and 24. So that is a new award category. We just started in 25. It is newer. And so frankly, the Translational Medicine Committee gives them a lot of attention because they're confirming that we were right to open up that category. So great question. So we have awarded Vet Med. You must connect it to human health. If you have a doctorate in veterinary medicine or your PhD is in veterinary medicine, you can still apply. It's rare, but it doesn't in any way dissuade anybody from looking at your application. That's a good question. Just historically, we did start out 60 years ago funding toxicology at med schools and vet schools. So it's a nice throwback to our history. Is any fellowship more competitive than the others? My project fits into the two categories, discovery and translational medicine. Which should I submit? This is a great question. So I think you need to read both, go on a walk, listen to your soul. What does it feel like? I'm not joking. I know that sounds trite, but your research fits very well into one of those categories, and I can't answer that question for you. What you can do is look at some of the previous award winners in both categories, reread the definitions of what our calls for are right now, and then be honest with yourself about which one you should apply to. This is a great question. Does it hurt your application if you applied before and were not funded? So we send back, we should send back feedback to you. So that is written by the reviewers, and we can't do it 100% of the time because sometimes reviewers don't provide any feedback. If you got feedback and your letter encourages you to reapply, absolutely tell us. You can write that down at the bottom of the LOI, just like Joanne said, this is a reapplication, and that's fine. The committee really likes people who listen to the feedback they got and reapply. But there is a key there. Remember, those reviewers will chime in if we get to discuss your application, and they'll say, oh, this did improve. So make sure that you recognize what we've asked you to improve. Put it in your full application, acknowledge it in your extended letter, and explain. Target delivery does meet the requirements for drug delivery. Do you get access to reviewer comments? So there are no reviewer comments at the LOI stage. Reviewer comments are for those that get reviewed, so that are not triaged at the full application stage. So I'd love to say you're going to get reviewer comments, but I can't guarantee it because the reviewers write them and we don't force them to. So if they write comments, we will send them to you. If they don't write anything, we can't send you feedback. So hopefully you'll get feedback. And I will say we've only required this for about 2 cycles now, and the reviewers are getting better at feedback. And honestly, some of them are better than others. So we do our best. So do we support predictive modeling for targeted drug delivery? I would say possibly, but the committee's going to look for a wet lab component to your research. Sorry. You cannot apply to multiple tracks. You have to pick one. For faculty awards, should you have one current mentor collaborator? Collaborator depends on your scientific question, and mentor. Joanne, you want to speak to faculty and mentors? Sorry, Joanne was typing live and now she's muted.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry, Amy, what was the question?
So for faculty award, should you have a current mentor?
Faculty starter grants typically don't have a mentor, but if you have somebody that was very instrumental in your career and you would like them to submit a letter of support on your behalf, that's highly recommended. If you have a mentor or a collaborator working with you, you should have them submit a letter of support on your behalf and explain what part of the project they're working on and why they're excited to be working on this project with you.
Fantastic. So to clarify, the topic of your research proposal cannot resemble any awarded grants from your PI. That's an interesting question because we had recently a discussed application. So the application was very good. It was discussed at committee. And I honestly don't remember if it was awarded or not. So the title of the application and the title of the PI's award was identical. And so at first the committee was concerned about that. And then they read the two documents and they were totally different. So the topic's fine, but you have to make sure it's a novel take on that lab.
I'd like to add to that, especially for pre-docs, when you are collaborating with your lab manager on a project or something along those lines, please be sure that you are writing your own project. You shouldn't be cutting and copying from their previous NIH funded award. You should be writing your own project and submitting it that way.
Yeah. And if you do cut and paste from another grant application, be sure to find and replace so that it says PhRMA Foundation and not another foundation. We've seen that happen in the last cycle.
And then those people are not considered.
Yeah. Does all of this information apply to the value assessment category? We will do another webinar on the value assessment category, so stay tuned. Most of it does apply, but there's no LOI process for the value assessment category. What do we do if we receive 2 LOIs from the same lab without it needing to go to the research office? Would both be rejected. For the full application, only one lab is going, sorry, a lab is only going to get one full application. But we shouldn't have 2 LOIs from the same category within one lab. So there shouldn't be. Joanne, you want to continue?
Yes. So Proposal Central is a fabulous application system, and it allows us to see who's from whose lab. So we can quickly ascertain who's applying from the same lab. And if that happens this cycle, we will be reaching out to that lab manager to say, we received 2 applicants from your lab. Which one should move forward in this LOI stage and who should be retracted? So it behoove you to talk to your lab managers and your thesis advisors to make sure you're not overlapping.
Is there a wet lab component for a grant application? So this is an example of it says that on our website for the delivery and discovery categories. What do you recommend for references at the pre-doc level? Your mentor, for sure, committee members, and if you've done work in another lab, I think those are all great choices. If you did undergraduate research, you probably should get a letter from them as well, because that shows your dedication, even in your earlier stages. If a pre-doc and a postdoc both apply, they will both be considered. But I will be honest with you, if you both make it to committee, they're going to compare. So I just want to let you know that they look and make sure they're novel ideas, and each of your ideas are separate from the PI's ideas. And that's if you both make it to discussion. If you both don't make it to discussion, obviously the one discussed has the chance. So good question. Much of the predictive research in drug delivery is software based. With dry lab validation work, can I apply? I believe currently the committee's looking for wet lab validation. Undergrad grades, I don't think are anywhere in the application package. So, so yeah, if you had a really fun undergraduate experience, great for you. We are not going to look at your grades. The main reason LOIs are rejected are two. One, it's incomplete in some way. You didn't follow directions. The other is if it's a muddy thought process. If you can't clearly communicate your idea at the LOI process stage in 600 words, then frankly, the committee doesn't want to read a full application that isn't clearly written. Those are the two main reasons. There is not a limit to the number of faculty starter grants per institution this cycle. You do not need to physically see patients to be eligible for the translational medicine fellowship, but they do prefer projects where you are collecting samples or working with actively collected patient samples. All right, so Emily, I have scanned and answered. Are there any that you want to bring to my attention right now that I haven't answered and I might have skipped over?
There were a couple more questions about like preliminary data, whether it was, could it be generated? Does it have to be generated by you? Could it be your lab or collaborators, prelim data to support? Does it have to be published or that sort of thing?
Preliminary data can come from you, it can come from your lab, it can come from a collaborator, it can come from the literature. But if it's coming from the literature, you have to really back it up with a good scientifically sound argument.
And then just to clarify, because there are a couple different questions on this, and this may be more for Joanne, about that requirement of 2 years into your, for the pre-docs, 2 years into your program, like, can you clarify one more time, just so everybody's clear on like what the pre-doc requirements are there?
For example, if you are on a 5-year track and you've only completed year 1 of your graduate school, don't apply. You're too early. We want you to be within those last 2 to 3 years. So if you're currently finishing your 2nd year of pre-doc studies, your graduate studies now, and you expect to do your qualifying exams and be approved for your candidacy sometime before August 1 of 2026, you should apply and make that notation as to when your exams or when your candidacy is going to approximately happen, December 2025, January 2026, and let us know that. But if you're not there yet and there's no date on the horizon, then do not apply.
And for your full application to be considered, your mentor will have to state that you are able to move on to your thesis research. So it has to be clearly stated in the mentor's letter.
And then another question was about postdoctoral eligibility, and if you're finishing up your PhD now, but you want to apply for the postdoc fellowship, you have to have a firm commitment from a university and a mentor that you're going to do a postdoc there before you apply and can receive our award.
Yes, that is completely correct.
Seeing if there are any other ones I missed in here.
For all of the specific eligibility questions we didn't answer, genuinely, please send them to info@PhRMAFoundation.org. We will think about every single question and give you an answer. And there are quite a few, so it might take us a bit because you're looking at the entire team. But we would like to answer them, just not in this format.
It says if you were awarded a pre-doc grant during grad school, are you still eligible for a faculty starter grant? Yes, you can win different levels of awards. If you got a pre-doc but are now in your first year of faculty, you can apply for that award.
And it's also fair to say it in your extended letter.
Joanne, remind me, because we were talking about qualifying exams, do they have to put that information in their LOI, or is that asked in the proposal central process?
It is asked at the LOI stage. So if the date's not there yet, put in an approximate date, because again, it will be confirmed again at the application stage. But again, if you don't have a date, you're not eligible.
And you can apply next year. PhRMA Foundation isn't going away next year, I promise. We're 60 years old. We hope to be here 60 years from now, not us specifically. All right. Well, we have done our best to look at 64 different questions and answer them in real time. If we didn't get to your question, please do send it to info. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We wish you the best of luck in the application process. Thank you.